Good evening, everyone. We begin the readout tonight with democracy on the ballot in November. Today, the House January 6th committee requested information from yet another one of their colleagues, Georgia Congressman Barry Loudermilk. The committee said it's looking for information on a tour of the Capitol that he gave the day before the siege. We'll have more on that later. Loudermilk is also one of the several Georgia Republicans who voted to overturn Arizona and Pennsylvania's results, and indicated that he would object to Georgia's electors as well. Joining him in declaring objection to Georgia's vote, Congressman Jody Hice. You'll want to remember that name. While that attempt to overthrow our democracy failed, pro-Trump insurrectionist Doug Mastriano is now the Republican nominee for governor in Pennsylvania, a role that would pick the Secretary of State who oversees elections. There's a very real threat, if elected, that he would use the power of his office to ensure that the next Republican candidate for president receives the state's 19 electoral college votes in 2024, no matter how Pennsylvania voters actually vote. Mastriano is far from alone in threatening our democracy. In Georgia, voters will decide next Tuesday if another election denier gets on the November ballot. Former Senator David Perdue, who was defeated by current Senator Jon Ossoff and who's been endorsed by Trump in his race for governor. He has said that the election was rigged. The man he's running against, incumbent Governor Brian Kemp, earned Trump's wrath by refusing to overturn the 2020 election in his state. Georgia was the center of Trump's attempt to steal the election in 2020. He's still under investigation over whether he broke state law with his mafioso-style bullying of Georgia officials, whom he demanded that they deliver him exactly the number of votes that he would need to win the state's 16 electoral votes.
So, look, all I want to do is this. I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have, because we won the state.
Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger's resistance to doing Trump's bidding earned him a primary challenge from another election denier, the aforementioned Jody Hice, whose entire candidacy is one giant insinuation that he will do what Raffensperger wouldn't. On January 6th, it was Hice who lodged the objection to Georgia's electoral vote being certified, even after the siege on the Capitol. The effort failed after former Senator Kelly Loeffler backed out. His full-throated embrace of the big lie has earned Hice the endorsement of the twice-impeached former president, who clearly indicated what he believes that Hice will do. Quote, unlike the current Georgia Secretary of State, Jody leads out front with integrity. I have 100% confidence in Jody to fight for free, fair, and secure elections in Georgia. Since then, Hice centered his campaign around false claims of fraud, saying Trump would have won Georgia if the election had been, quote, fair, and repeatedly making false claims about the 2020 election, including in a debate with Raffensperger just a few weeks ago.
The big lie in all of this is that there were no problems in this past election. This election was filled with problems.
But it actually gets worse. The former president has also endorsed another election denier for Secretary of State in Michigan. And you won't even believe what he said about the incumbent in that race. And we'll get to that soon. But joining me now, Yamiche Alcindor, and she's the moderator and anchor of Washington Week on PBS and an MSNBC Washington correspondent, and Stuart Stevens, former chief strategist for Mitt Romney's 2012 campaign and senior advisor to the Lincoln Project. Thank you all for being here. So let's just, I have a map here that I want to show both of you. And this just shows you how serious this election denier situation is. Now, for those of you viewing at home, in yellow are the places in which there are election deniers running for Secretary of State. That's Connecticut, Indiana, Minnesota, New Mexico, and Washington. In red are places where election deniers are running for governor: Alaska, Florida, Maine, Maryland, Minnesota, New York, Oklahoma, Oregon, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, and Texas. And the orange, we brought the two colors together, that's where one of each is running, one for Secretary of State and one for governor. You see that map is a lot of the United States. That total adds up to 2 out of the 3 contests in the United States. And those states that we see in color, that are colored in, that's 70% of the electoral votes that are up for grabs. If all of those places were to elect the Republican, in theory, 70% of the Electoral College would be under the control of election deniers. Yamiche, I want to ask you, you're on the Hill, you talk to a lot of Democrats. Do they understand the seriousness of that threat in your reporting?
Joy, that map is just so sobering. And when I talk to Democratic lawmakers and White House officials, they say that they understand the magnitude of this moment. They understand that we're really looking at January 6th forever, this long shadow of a lie that is now really a warning for the very credibility of our democracy. But I also should tell you, I just got off the road talking to everyday voters, and I will say very concerned Democratic voters who say that they don't feel like their lawmakers are being as aggressive as the Republicans are in being aggressive in not only getting their candidates in office who are election deniers, but also continuing that lie and pushing for things to be in their favor. When we look at Pennsylvania, the man who has now won the Republican nomination to be governor in that state, David Mastriani, he is someone who would have the power to choose the Secretary of State. So this is no longer sort of just tweets and sort of speeches and rhetoric. This is someone who would directly be able to say, is the 2024 presidential election results, can they be certified or not? And if it seems as though with the Republicans, based on their critics, that they are only going to go with the people that are sort of on their same ideology if they want them to win, and they will question the election if a Democrat wins. So I think lawmakers absolutely get the urgency of this, but I will say that the people who are backing them are very, very frustrated that they are not figuring out a strategy to really effectively push back on this.
And this is the thing, Stuart. It isn't just saying the election wasn't won. It isn't just denying it. It's actually being in a position to reverse it and essentially negate the vote in their states. That's what they're setting up to do. I mean, in the state of North Carolina, Democrats nominated the former Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, Cheri Beasley, a perfectly normal, moderate Democrat. The Republicans nominated a guy named Ted Budd, who voted to overturn North Carolina's Electoral College votes, his own state. He voted to basically eliminate his own state's vote. Let's go to Florida. Ron DeSantis has picked for his Secretary of State. Here's what the Orlando Sentinel said about Cord Byrd, who's going to be the Secretary of State in Florida. Ron DeSantis has chosen a Republican ally with no expertise in elections, a history of excessive partisanship, and a provocative streak. This is the person who will oversee the newly created elections police force in the State Division of Elections. To make things worse, Byrd's wife, Esther, is a Proud Boys supporter who has defended the January 6th Capitol riot and the far-right QAnon conspiracy cult. One more. Let's listen to Doug Mastriano, because he has a religious conviction that Republicans must win every major election. Here's Doug Mastriano.
Any freedom-loving Americans in the house here? Wow, 1 Corinthians 1:27 gives us all hope. God uses the foolish to confound the wise and the weak to confound the strong, right? That's his story, and he uses people like you and me to change history. But we're going to take this state by storm. We're going to restore freedom and liberty. This is our time, right? This is our hour. So let's walk in freedom. Let's choose this day. Let's choose this day to serve the Lord.
Stuart, when you have Republicans who now essentially view elections as a religious jihad, essentially, what does one do about that in a democracy?
Well, there's only one thing you can do. You have to beat these people. They're not going to change their minds. You can't meet them halfway and say, well, maybe half the ballot was legal and the other half wasn't. Maybe the governor's race is legal, but the lieutenant governor isn't. You just have to beat them. And I'm really glad that you're putting that map up there and showing it, because I think it's one of the most difficult things here is for those of us who believe in democracies to concede the fact that it doesn't always have to be this way. And there is tremendous threat out there. And the map is actually worse than you're showing, because there are very few Republican governors out there who will aggressively assert that Donald Trump lost a free and fair election. And once that becomes the norm, then anything that you do is not about rigging the election. It's about restoring what was right. So you not only have a rationale for doing it, it's like Mastriano was saying, you have an obligation to do this. And all of this is really, again, about race. It's about the Republicans' inability to come up with a message and a platform and candidates that will appeal to a changing non-white America.
And they've decided, Yamiche, then, that what they can do about that is to essentially eliminate the votes of voters of color. They'll say, well, we're simply going to say Philadelphia votes no longer exist. We're going to delete them. We don't think Fulton County votes in Georgia exist. We're going to delete them. They're setting up a situation. And that is what I wonder if it'll, I mean, I get that the base of the Democratic Party understands this, but I wonder if D.C. Democrats, because I don't get the vibe that they understand this isn't just politics. Should these Republicans win in enough numbers to decide the election themselves, not the voters of this country, them, a small cult of MAGA worshipers who have a religious conviction that white Christians must win, their type of Christian, I'll put an asterisk on it, they must win because God wants that. There isn't anything to stop them. And I don't see that D.C. Democrats understand that. I haven't seen evidence of it.